Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about some different styles of nylon string guitars. I have a number of different guitars because I use them in different settings. Might have a strong concert sounding guitar for a concert setting, or a guitar that sounds better for recordings. It's one that sounds better for flamenco or better for Brazilian music. So in this video we're going to talk about all of that stuff. So let's get stuck in. The first guitar I want to talk to you about, and maybe spend 30 seconds to a minute on each guitar, is this traditional guitar made by Richard Howell. It's a handmade guitar that I've had for about 6-7 years, and he made this guitar for me, which is really nice, and it's a handmade instrument. So straight away we're talking about, fairly expensive woods and craftsmanship, but what you end up is with a really beautiful traditional sound. It's a fan strutted instrument, so the internals have this sort of strutting inside, which give it stability and a certain sturdiness of sound. The top is cedar and the back and sides are rosewood. The neck is rosewood. So what you end up with is really beautiful crystal clear trebles, and love the basses, which are quite penetrating and roaring, but not too boomy, not too bassy. So this is really perfect for classical music, because you can really get that 70s sort of John Williams fletter sound, but also great for if you're just playing melodic work. I've used this on soundtracks and TV work. And it's actually, as it gets older, it gets more beautiful sounding. So I just have to remind myself to play this a lot. So Richard Howell, Fletter style. Fletter was a Spanish guitar maker who sort of revolutionized, or became sort of the one of the benchmarks for really traditional classical guitar. One thing that has happened over time is that guitars have become more modern. And that's because guitarists want more sound and they want more body in their instruments. And so we've had a little bit of a shift away from these instruments, even though a lot of guitarists still use them, and I do for lots of different things. So what happened was, I think it was Greg Smallman, who is an Australian guitar maker, who decided to sort of change the internals of his guitar. And he created this thing called the Lattice braced. So the next guitar I'm going to talk about is the Lattice brace guitar. This is the style of guitar that was made famous by Greg Smallman in the 70s and 80s. And he took one of these guitars to John Williams, who then switched from the fletter style, which is what I just played, to one of these instruments. And one of the strongest characteristics of these guitars is that the internals are very different. It's a much lighter top. This is a spruce top, which is, also comes in traditional. But inside you have this sort of lattice braced structure, which allows for a real sturdiness but a very lightness of top, so you get way more projection. And then the back and sides are really thick, so it's a very heavy instrument. There's a lot of cedar in this and rosewood, but a little bit of olive, which is the lighter wood. And what you get is a much fatter sound, much less a lot more body, which in a concert situation really projects out and fills the room a lot more. So they're louder instruments. They're really, I would say mid-range and a lot of mid and bass, especially in the trebles. So I've had this guitar for over 20 years, maybe 26 years, because I bought this when I was a student. And so it's a little bit worse for wear, but it still has a beautiful concert sound, and particularly good for Bach. It has a really crisp attack still, and it's not as warm as, say, the Cedar version of this. But if you ever hear of lattice brace guitars, we're talking about a lattice internals, very thin top, and made famous by Greg Smallman. This particular guitar was handmade by Paul Sheridan in Perth. So these are two of the main sort of classical style guitars that you'll find when you go and see a classical guitarist. Now the third style of classical guitar, we're still in the classical realm, is the double top. And this is my latest instrument, made by Kerry Petticini, who lives in Balnarring, also on the Mornington Peninsula. And it's a double top in that it's a traditional guitar with two of these tops on it. And the double top gives it quite a lot of fatness, but it keeps some of the traditional feel and the traditional sound. That was one of the things about the Lattice braces. They tend to sound a little less traditional, less Spanish. Great for Bach, but maybe not so good for Albanese, or you certainly can't play flamenco on them. This guitar, you seem to be able to play everything on it. So I use this for my blog to record all my videos. It just captures the sound so well. I just don't have to tweak it really hardly at all. I just put this little microphone in front of it and off you go. But I'm also planning to use it for concerts when we're allowed to play concerts again. So yeah, very sweet, slightly fat tone. So you just have to listen to most of my videos on my channel, my performance videos, and you'll hear this guitar. So the double top, two of these tops glued together with some Kevlar in the middle. It just gives you a lot of sustain and power, but you get to keep that kind of that Spanish sort of crystal quality. So one of my favorite instruments is the double top classical guitar. The next guitar I want to demo is your traditional flamenco guitar. This is a slightly different flamenco guitar in that it has a cutaway, but you see a lot of street performers playing the cutaways, also known as a crossover. It's got a slightly thinner neck, this one. But yeah, you have your cypress, which is your general flamenco guitar sound, and the internals of the flamenco are a little bit different from a classical, such that you end up with a slightly, you get a lot more compressed sound, less woofy, more percussive, which is kind of what flamenco guitarists need, because they need to accompany generally singing and dancing, and it really needs to cut through. So you get that, all that kind of resquedo things that happen. All of that alzapua, thumb work. This also has a scratch plate. You can still play classical things on it, but it's just not quite as penetrating, and the tone really isn't there. The nice thing about this guitar is that it has a pickup, so I do use this a lot at gigs, and it's a really nice pickup with a blend of a microphone as well. So traditional flamenco guitar, different to a classical, different woods, different internals, more of a sound suited to percussive playing. The next guitar I want to share with you is my flamenco guitar, and sometimes I play this on the channel as well. I bought this in Seville from Alvarez and Bernal, who's a guitar maker in Seville, and what I like about it is that it's a cedar flamenco. So unlike the spruce flamenco, it has more of a warm sound for a flamenco. It's still the flamenco internals, so you can still get that. And I use it for any of my flamenco Spanish work, Spanish gigs, recording, but a little bit of classical stuff as well. It just has slightly more percussive, less warm tone than some of my classical guitars. But if I want it cut through melodically, or even I use it a little bit for Brazilian stuff, you know. Suits Brazilian, according to me, that Brazilian sound. So you sometimes can find flamenco guitars with a cedar top. The last nylon string I'm going to share with you is the Godan, which is an unusual looking instrument, sort of heading towards more the electric look, because it has very little body, and it's designed just to be played plugged in, so there's not a lot there. In order to get the full value out of it, you need to plug it in. This particular guitar also has a MIDI input, so you can play it through a MIDI synthesizer and get some different types of sounds as well. What it's great for is jazz. I'd use it for any jazz types gigs, sometimes playing with the band, and you'll find that even though a lot of my guitars do have pickups, the Flamenco does, 2 Flamencos do, it's going to have too much feedback, so this is a perfect instrument if you don't want to have feedback. There's a little bit of graphic EQ here, and yeah, it's really lovely instrument to play if you're playing sort of jazzy stuff. So that covers some of my guitar collection, which is mainly nylon string guitars. You'll probably see at the back there that I have a Gibson ES75 and a Stratocaster, which is actually my son's Stratocaster, some steel string guitars, which I use a little bit less, but the nylon strings are the ones that I do most of my work on because I'm a nylon string specialist. And certainly the traditional Lattice style, the double top and the Lattice brace are the main 3 classical instruments that I would use in a classical context, and the flamenco guitars are definitely the ones that I use more of in a Latin context or South American context. Most of my guitars, except for the spruce, are handmade, so they're all instruments that have cost me quite a lot of money, but they're tools of the trade. It's definitely worth for me spending money on quality craftsmanship and woods, which get better over time. I've got a few factory made guitars which I'll talk to you about next time, because you can certainly still get really quality instruments made in factories by Altamira and other companies, but I didn't really want to talk too much about that today. So what type of guitars do you guys use? Do you use a particular brand that you like or guitar maker? Let us know in the comments. I hope that gives you a little bit of insights into different styles of guitar, because they all look very similar, but the internals and the sound is so different. That's it from me, and I'll catch you next video.